Hello, and welcome back to the Talk It Like a Man podcast. It is I, Hristo, co-host Josh, missing our third star, Sam, but that's fine. We'll make it up to you. We have a very special guest, Euan from the talent team, who is set to give us his background story. Just tell us all about Euan.
Okay, so yes, my name's Euan McCall. I work as a career development consultant for the talent team, which is basically a career service, which was sort of had a renamed last year. So my main role is I'm a careers advisor for health and life science students at the uni, but also since I've been at the uni for the last 6 years, I've done a lot of work around sort of diversity, disability. So looking at our service to make sure that it's kind of disability friendly and that we're trying to support all the students, but also I work a lot with students who are concerned about going to the workplace because they're not sure about the application process or what happens when they start the job and what to share with employers, what not to share with employers. And then also, you know, I've in the workplace, I've had to go through various adjustments quite recently in terms of the way my working life has changed due to various health things. So that's definitely, I've got a personal insight as well, I guess.
Yeah, Josh mentioned that some psychology students might recognize you. Josh, why is that again?
Yeah, so as part of the kind of the access to employment module, I can't remember the exact title of it, a lot of us had to do or were encouraged to do kind of discussions with the talent team on how to improve CVs and kind of job plans moving forward after university. So I know that I think both myself and Hristo met with Euan last year.
Had a lovely chat as well.
Yeah, it was very positive, very informative, and I did continue I'm still working on my plan and moving forward, so that's always good. How do you think kind of the current pandemic is going to affect things? Have you seen kind of more people looking for support with employment or?
So yeah, in terms of the students I've worked with, obviously the job market has changed. We're hoping that in the next sort of year or so, certainly for the graduate job market, it will recover quite a lot. And generally, graduates are doing better than non-graduates. And I feel sorry for the non-graduates, but that sort of tends to be the case. But some of the big ways it's affected students is obviously the change in study style is not for all students. And some have found that difficult. The different styles of assessment have affected students' confidence. But one of the biggest thing is, certainly for psychology students, for example, for a lot of careers like clinical psychology or counselling, you need a lot of work experience. And a lot of those routes to work experience have been closed off because a lot of face-to-face services have gone, a lot of charities have closed, a lot of NHS placements have gone. So actually students are even more worried about their prospects because you know, some of the building blocks they need for their CV aren't in place. So that's another kind of issue. But I've also had a lot of students who are, I would say, more this year than any other year, just very anxious about moving on and have maybe had personal health issues, but also been caring for loved ones. And that's really put their plans back, you know, 6 months in some case. So yeah, it's definitely been challenging.
Yeah, I think there's kind of definitely a difference in the amount of opportunities that are open to people at the moment, especially as some kind of have chosen to leave the country or aren't in the country kind of due to different circumstances. And now even now there seems to be more jobs opening up in the hospitality sector and kind of some aspects of care and support work, which obviously are always good jobs for students, but not necessarily giving them experience in a specific field that they're looking to. So do you think that they will be coming back, these internships and these placements, or do you think we're suddenly going to have double, like what do you foresee as the outcome now?
I think one slight issue we've got is that we've almost got a double year going for the same stuff. So this year's finalists are competing with the new finalists for some similar placements, which does make life a bit tricky. But I would say that, you know, some of the students I work with, you know, some of the charities, for example, they wanted to get work experience, they switched their provision to like text services or helpline services or online services. So there were still opportunities. So I think some of those will be kept, plus some of the more face-to-face stuff will open as well. So I think, and also all those organisations, they are desperate for the volunteers. You know, it obviously helps the students, but actually on the other side, they really need those people. They don't have enough money to pay everyone. So a lot of the I guess the expectations and the predictions about the next year for the whole job sector are pretty good. And they've talked about there being, a sudden deluge of vacancies from about June, July this year, as a lot of employers who are holding back suddenly start to sort of request people. And some of the graduate level jobs that often close many months earlier have been delayed. Yeah. So actually some of them might become available now, when normally they would have closed months and months ago. So I think there are some reasons for optimism. And then obviously for the students, it's trying to pick employers, if they are worried about health or disability, those ones that are a bit more inclusive. You have a track record, I'd say, is the big thing.
So how do kind of students identify or look for those employers that do have kind of more of the positive track record, or I don't know, just how do they know? Are there questions they can ask? Are there lists they can find?
Well, I've got kind of I've always had a checklist in my head that I've never written down until today, which is probably quite useful to do. So a few things to look out for. I mean, firstly, there are lists and there are ranking tables around diversity. So there's different ones. There's Disability Confident, which is a scheme that employers can sign up for. And it's usually a bit of a charter mark and a guide that employers have gone through the right stages. They've got good structures to help students with mental health issues or disabilities. And you can actually find that's a published list. You can look at all the employers on there, and that's a good starting point. And then also, for example, employers that come on campus, they might have specialist diversity internships or placements, or they might actually be directly looking for students from diverse backgrounds. They might be actually advertising the fact that they want to recruit people, because historically a lot of big employers recruit the same people every single year from certain social backgrounds, certain ethnicities, fairly mainstream, and actually they then can't relate to their customers because their staff are all from a particular group. So there's kind of all the league table stuff. There's other stuff I guess I look out for in terms of mental health. So, some employers have actual communities in the job for people from different diverse backgrounds. So like civil service, for example, there's whole communities you can join, so you're supported when you actually start the job. And then some of the other things are around the practicality. So if you go for a job and you're worried about disclosing it, the fact that you've got mental health issue or disability, are they open to that? Are there ways of communicating it? Are there ways of disclosing it at different points? Is that organisation willing to make adjustments for you? So say there were parts of an interview or assessment centre that were a real issue for you. Are there ways that they can accommodate you, make things more welcoming or more supportive? So there's lots of kind of different things, but I think the disability conference is a good place to start. And then the other thing is a lot of these organisations, they're active on social media, and they use some of their own graduates to staff Twitter and Facebook. And you always get a more, it's a bit like when you come to uni, you have a look around, you've got a student ambassador. You can ask them questions that you might not ask a lecturer or a member of staff. And it's the same with the staff. So quite often you can ask them anything about, okay, is this employer genuinely supportive? Are they genuinely inclusive? And that's often, a good sign. So it's kind of some of those areas. And the final thing I'd say is do they have a culture of training staff around mental health? So at Cov Uni, for example, a lot of our staff are mental health first aiders, which is quite a common scheme. Are their actual employers signed up to such schemes? Because that's also, a good sign. So that's some of the probably things I'd look out for.
Yeah, so there are definitely things you can keep your eye out on to notice if employees are actually implementing the schemes that they're advertising, and ways to get like a look behind the curtain, as you mentioned, through social media or through rankings and things. That's really good. That's really good. That's something that all students should consider, because it's really important, especially if it's their first steps into their professional life. It's something that they should definitely consider.
Definitely. And I think, like you said, the first steps are quite scary for anyone. And if you're going for your first graduate job, or like you guys might be going for an assistant psychologist job or something like that, if that first experience is kind of supportive and welcoming, it makes a big difference. But if that first experience is a challenging one, that can obviously hold people back for a while. And my first job out of uni, my first professional job out of uni, is I trained as a reporter. And I'll be honest, I was in an utterly terrifying newsroom. I mean, it was, you get shouted at, called out. If you went to the toilet for too long, they'd send someone after you. It sounds awful, but it kind of stuck with me for quite a while. So yeah, that is a big issue.
Okay. So when I was doing your background check before this, I was getting to know you, or your internet self at least. I did see that you were a reporter in like the early 2000s. How did you decide to get into the field that you're in now? What was your path from a graduate? Like, what did you study? What were the steps that you took? What was the moment that you decided, oh, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is where I want to do it?
That's a very good question. So one thing about careers advisors is very few of them started their journey want to be a careers advisor. That sounds awful. It's kind of one of those careers you discover later. So apart from, I did work with one woman once who said she had her own careers library from the age of 5. But that's quite unusual, I'd say. So in our team, you've got people who've been teachers, quite a lot of people at Tracks, quite a lot of people who've worked in human resources, definitely education. We've got a few people from science backgrounds, people with PhDs, it's quite broad. So in my case, I did sociology at uni, and then I did a year working in a homeless hostel in Coventry, which has actually been knocked down now, Salvation Army, which is just on the Folsall Road, which was a really interesting place to work. And at that point, I thought, I liked the idea of writing and journalism, and I was very passionate about sport. And my lecturer said, oh, you like football, don't you? Why don't you go and be a sports journalist? That was literally the only career advice I had, which I then pursued with very little research, if I'm absolutely honest. I did a postgrad in journalism at DMU. And then I did it for a few years. And I realised, if I'm honest, if I was giving myself advice, as when I was at that point, it didn't really fit my attributes. It's fair to say. You've got to be really tough, really resilient. You've got to be up for a battle or argument every single day of the week, and that's not really me. So I left and then decided, actually, I want to go back to social care or working with people. And then I did something called the Prospects Planner, which still exists. It's like a careers match website, and it suggested careers advisor #1. And then I literally, a week later, I went for an interview as like an administrator at a career centre, and they said, oh no, we'll train you as a careers advisor. And that's 15 years later, I'm still doing it. So to say there was a little bit of fortune in there and a lack of planning would be fair.
I do think there's something brilliant about going on a careers website and them saying you should be a careers advisor, because it just seems so cyclical. Like, do you know what? You want a job? You can do my job. Let's do that. Like,
just come on board.
So yeah, a bit of a strange journey, but it's a great job. I mean, it's a kind of job that a lot of students in your faculties like psychology, childhood studies, criminology. Actually, I always think it'd be quite a good job for you guys, but it's sometimes not as exciting and sexy as some of the other options people know about. But yeah, that was kind of my journey. But I'd always had an interest in kind of, I'd worked with young offenders, I've worked with homeless people, and I've always found that kind of element quite interesting. So that's how I've ended up here, I suppose.
So with the things you mentioned, it seems like you always wanted to be of help to people, whether it be homeless people or students looking to make steps in their career. You always wanted to be the guy whose shoulder they can cry on for a little bit, and I respect that. That is definitely something that I think both me and Josh can relate to. So as a career advisor right now at Coventry within the talent team, you get a lot of people like me and Josh, clueless, not knowing what they want to do, not knowing how to do what they don't want, what they don't know what to do. So you get to meet a lot of people. What's the biggest misconception students right now have about careers? What's something that they usually get wrong about professional life?
That's a really good question. So I think it's actually both ends of the spectrum. I'd say a lot of students are incredibly humble, and they completely underestimate what they've done and what they've achieved. So, like both of you have been involved in the SU, for example, I read CVs and people don't even mention they've been a rep or been involved in the SU. They don't think it's important, or they've had a job as a carer for years, or maybe they have worked in hospitality, but they've worked with some really difficult, challenging environments and difficult people, and they don't think it's crucial. So one of the big issues is a lot of students definitely downplay their achievements and their grades, and they think it's not worth mentioning, but actually that's the thing that makes a difference. Occasionally you have the other end of the spectrum where people think it's going to be really, really easy, but actually they're in the minority. I mean, the tricky thing is sometimes there's certain careers that are incredibly, incredibly competitive, and they've maybe underestimated what it's going to take. And sometimes that's difficult because you have to, it's a fine balance with encouraging people, but being realistic, because you don't want them to just walk off and think, I can't do it. But at the same time, they have to know it's a challenge. Like, unfortunately, things like clinical psychology or medicine are kind of on that list. In terms of other issues, I think there are sometimes barriers, because when you look at a lot of graduate jobs, and they all look very, very shiny and exciting, and the prospects are good, but sometimes they're only available in certain places. Like, you've got to work in London, you've got to work in Birmingham, you've got to work in Manchester. A lot of our students can't do that. You know, their parents, they're mature students, they've got care and responsibilities, and they can't just up and leave. And sometimes that's a real challenge, or they're looking after loved ones and things like that. So that can be difficult as well. And I suppose the other difficult thing is, which you mentioned earlier, is the whole experience issue. Because there are a lot of students who say, I've got a degree and I've paid 30 grand. Where's my job? And I could, you know what I mean? You're paying 30 grand for something. If I spent 30 grand in a car, you know, I'd expect
it to be running, yeah.
You're running straight away. So the tricky thing is, if sometimes you've got students who actually, their family has no history of going to uni, and they've maybe, you know, with the family talks about the prospects it's going to get them, but it doesn't happen straight away. Because sometimes actually, you know, it is a combination, a lot of cases, of the degree and the experience, and sometimes you can't do one without the other. So that's sometimes the tricky conversation is, although people have invested a lot, there's still more you've got to do. And whether that's a year-long placement, a summer placement, whether it's a part-time job, whether it's volunteering, doing stuff with the SU, it's that kind of balance of doing both. And that's sometimes really difficult conversation, because I completely sympathise sometimes with that scenario.
I think that's one of the few positives of the pandemic, is that there's so many kind of digital volunteering opportunities at the moment, so that actually it doesn't matter those kind of location issues. Even the people that have moved home but within the UK, moved home but abroad, can still access these things and do them, as opposed to it just being oh no, you've had to move back to London, Edinburgh, Bulgaria, whatever whatever the distance is. They can still access it and get these kind of levels of experience through different charities and different organisations, which obviously is one of the small positives coming out of it. And so actually, like, kind of looking at applying and applications and CVs, what is the kind of the big giveaways of a good or bad CV?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time looking at CVs. I hate to think how many I've read in the last 15 years, but I still really enjoy looking at CVs. And I know that might sound a bit sick, but I think the good thing about CVs, they're like a 2-page summary of someone's life. You know, the ups and the downs and the experiences, and sometimes, like, you look at a CV and they've got everything they need, but they're just not quite presenting it right. So often, when the first time I look at a CV, the first thing we just look at is the presentational stuff. So, for example, is it no more than 2 sides? Is it, because sometimes you'll see a CV, it's like got colour, it's got 4 different fonts, it's in 6 different sizes, it's 5 pages. You've got funky formatting that you can't explain. So actually, the first 2 sessions are just actually getting it into a point it looks like plausible. So I mean, but that's rare actually. You know, most students bring a fairly decent CV first time. So some of it is, you know, if you've got to work on the basis that the employer might only read a CV for 30 seconds in some cases. Some people say actually under 20 seconds. So if you're going to get from the pile of maybes into the yes pile, firstly, it's got to be really clear, really easy to read, and broken down into lots of sort of different blocks and logical. And then the other stuff is often around the evidence you use and making it relevant for the job. So quite a lot of students I work with have got one CV for every job. They work in a bar, they want to work for the Bank of England, they want to be a lecturer, they've got one CV. And often, like, the skills you need for one job are completely different from another. So that's one of the big things, is saying like the core of your CV, the 80% you can use probably every time, but there's 20% we just need to tweak. Otherwise, an employer looks at it and thinks, that's not for me. That could be for any employer. So sometimes you've got to stroke the ego of the employer a little bit in that sense. But yeah, I could probably talk for 3 hours about CVs, but you've got lives to live. So
that's really cool. That's really cool, because as someone who has no experience with CVs whatsoever, I love reading them. Like if someone says, "Oh, do you want to look at my CV?" Yes, I do. Please. I'll probably give you bad advice. I'll probably make you actively worse, but I will look at it and I'll be happy about it too. Because as you say, it gives you like a peek into what someone thinks about what they've done so far and how they think it should be presented.
And I do definitely think it's one of the things that you just have to keep updated. I know even recently I had a colleague that came upon a job offer in a conversation, and then they quickly kind of just said, "Oh, I can send you my CV." And because they had an up-to-date CV, like they hadn't changed jobs in 2-3 years, but they had still been keeping it up to date. So it just meant that actually they could email over within the next 5-10 minutes a current CV and just say, actually, like, this is me at the moment. And I think that's kind of always a good thing to have on hand. And I know I say that, but I had to send mine to somebody today and spent an hour editing it because I hadn't done it in a year. So I know I do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, and you're not alone on that one. I mean, that is pretty common. But yeah, if you could have it, I guess if your CV is within half an hour editing of being ready, because sometimes, like some of the jobs, for example, on the NHS job site, they tend to want a statement. But sometimes if they've got enough people, they'll close it on the day. Like before you even spotted it, it's gone. So yeah, so there are things like this to sort of take into account. The other thing, I suppose, which is becoming equally important, is LinkedIn. So at some point, LinkedIn's going to be as important, if not more important, than CVs, probably.
Yeah, we know. I mean, I know how Josh feels about that website. I feel like it's useful. I feel like it's a good thing to have going on. We might have different opinions on that, do we, Josh, or no?
I mean, I've started to use it as a digital log, so not as much to push out to employers, but as my own ongoing log of things that I'm doing, essentially because I've already kind of worked for 10 years and have a range of different things, like opportunities, volunteering, things that I've done that I would just forget about. And I applied for a job recently and then suddenly realized, oh, actually, I led this campaign for a while. I forgot that I did that, and actually it's very relevant. So I've started using LinkedIn more just to keep a log of all the random volunteering things I've been doing. So we're getting there, Hristo. I'm still not 100% on LinkedIn.
Yeah, one day we'll get you. One day we'll. Especially if you listen to people like you, and you will be converted. You will join the LinkedIn army as well. So unfortunately, due to the limitations of technology, we might have to wrap this up. However, I know Josh is too, am really enjoying this conversation, and we would love if you could come back to a second part where we'd dive even deeper into the things that you do, into the ways that you can help students. So if you're happy, we'll gladly have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely delighted. Yeah, I can do another 3 hours on CVs if you want.
Okay, I'll get my CV questions ready as well. Well, okay, on that note, thank you very, very much. We are very, very excited to have you on again in the very near future. And until then, have a good one, and we'll see you when we see you.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.